Well, hello and welcome to part 3 of All Things Virtual Marketing with Bob Spence.
We're doing this, but I'm sure there's some tips that would enable us to do this better.
Yes.
Preparation's everything. You've got to get out there. It's pretty basic stuff. Get out there in advance what this call is going to be like. That's the first thing. So get an agenda, and rather than have one agenda that breaks into 4 units, have 4 agendas that build one thing, because it's easier to manage 4 things that make one thing than one thing broken into 4. So I said, prepare it. Let the people coming on the call know what to expect. Secondly, don't manage the call yourself. Have one of your team actually managing the IT. Make sure you're not the person that's having to do that. And there are certain little things that you can do on top. I mean, first of all, if you're using Zoom, for example, induct people into the technology. Do not presume that people know how to use Zoom or Teams or anything, in fact. So maybe have the first 5 minutes of any meeting. So I'd be going, okay, what we're going to do now, Barry, I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes just doing a 360 around how this technology works. If this is new information, it's a good job I'm doing it. If it's old information, it's just a double check. And no one's going to complain about that. And most people will be doing happy that you've done that. And as you do that, that kind of replaces the bit where you were walking them from the reception table, or you're making someone a coffee, or you're meeting someone by the lift, where you make that little bit of small talk and you make that connection. Well, now make that connection by inducting them into how this technology works. And then you might do things like, well, if I'm going too fast, just put something in the chat box. If you want to raise attention with me, put something in the chat box. Now, here's the thing. If you get people using the chat box and you've got someone managing the call, that's a lot easier than people cutting in. Because the challenge with people cutting in is the audio track might bounce dependent on the voice over internet connection. So get people to be using the chat box rather than raising their hand or speaking.
What sort of numbers, Bob, do you feel you need to move to that chat box?
I would go 4 and upwards. The chat box is the secret weapon for the lawyer in a call.
Bob's got a number of tools that you can add on, merge with the likes of Zoom and Teams, which enable you to keep people's attention there.
And physically wander off, put your photograph up, pretend you're still there and disappear.
That's right.
Yeah. Hands up anybody who's not put their photo up during a particularly dull one and gone to make a cup of tea.
Yeah, I think with the chat box, especially on those bigger conferences, you make a point at the start of inducting people into it, and then get the person running the call to put something into the chat box that you respond to, and then ask people to start responding in the chat box. Insist on engagement. Can we just make sure that everyone in Wales is picking that up? Anyone from Wales, can you just put, hey there? And those guys from the Midlands, can you put something in the chat box? And it's that kind of thing. I mean, you've really got to sweat when you're on a call, almost work twice as hard. Another thing, which Barry brought up there, is it's the use of the egg timer. Like an egg timer, you got like 3 minutes. Well, if you keep turning the egg timer, you want to name drop people every 3 minutes. So technically, if this was a client meeting, every 3 minutes, I would be saying something then referring to Barry. So Barry, this might be a point where you might want to come in. And then it's going a little bit longer, and then 3 minutes later, Howard, we haven't heard from you so far. Oh, all right, okay. You see what I'm doing there? You got it. It's the technique, Mark, is called calling people out. You have to call people out on a call. And time passes very differently through a camera. So if you think something like this, that whatever you do in a boardroom that lasted a minute seems like 3 minutes on a camera. And the thing which Barry's referring to is 2 things. One is recollection of new information, it deteriorates dramatically through a camera. And the other thing is that engaging people, because you can't read the room. So the key to it is a concept called storytelling selling. And it kind of reverses some of the things, Barry, that you're going to have to do. So if you think that before, your introduction, you may have a killer introduction. None of that works through a camera. It just doesn't. So almost you have to skip the introduction, skip your credentials for doing the job, and get them talking far, far earlier than you would do if you're in your own office. Scrap that. Almost, Barry, I reckon the first 12 minutes of an average introduction is a dead man walking now, because through a camera, you're going, well, so what?
And why is it? Why is it so much more difficult?
One of the features is there's lots of little things that are taking place that actually tire you out. One is, like on a call like this, I'm actually looking directly into my camera, directly. You can't see it, but I've got a red arrow just above here that forces me to look at the camera and not drift to see, is Nigel drinking his coffee? I wonder if Mark's paying attention. So that's one thing. It's tiring to look specifically at a camera.
But on top of that, Bob, there's also screen sharing. If you're taking somebody through a document, and for many of us, that document will be on the second monitor.
Yeah.
I might spend 10 minutes of a Zoom call over here.
Yeah.
And the other problem is, which isn't so evident, but it would be, that the audio channels that we're all going through are occurring at slightly different paces. So what you've got, which is what Nigel's just referred to, you might be working off two screens, plus the webcam, plus the audio channel can be behaving at different points, and you're focusing on your delivery. It really is tiring mentally. And if you think about it, it's going to be the same for the person on the other side. So it's not just your delivery, it's how they're taking it in as well.
Why can't I tell with you whether it's virtual or real?
In the first instance, got a top of the range a camera. This here, it is actually a green screen. So what you've got is a pole. So it's hanging free, but there's weights on the bottom. And then what I've done is, just to show you, I've added something that could just as easily be from the back of me. So you it's tricking your eye. It's tricking your eye line, but you're thinking, well, that probably is where he is, because look, there's something there as well. Look back into the preparation part of it. So you'll find if you give people a format of what's going to happen. So I would always say, whatever subject you've got, try and break it into 4 units. So what you're doing is managing 4 units, and your wingman or partner is managing those 4 units. So you might say, okay, we've got a 40-minute meeting and we've got 4 lots of 10 minutes. I've got Nigel's going to be managing that. So you'll see Nigel in the text box giving us gentle reminders how we're doing. And if any of you feel that we need to speed up or slow down, that's the place to put your comments into the chat box. So doing introductions via webcam, that's dangerous in terms of time management. So I'd probably put in an email to Nigel when we meet, just to introduce, this is me, this is what I do, this is Barry, this is what Barry does. Could you drop me an email and reciprocate? So I'm inclined to get introductions done via email, not live on the call.
Techniques. I know you've got a lot of material from Johannesburg. Is there some of that you can sort of share with us and help us?
So what you've got in the Southern Hemisphere is a realization that face-to-face meetings are possible, but are probably less likely. And a significant part of the selection process that a client will have may go through the camera. But the idea of doing, let's call it straight, deals or transactions through a camera, that's going to be a quantum jump for the UK, I think, because, it's not like Australia where it's really spread out. So what's happened was almost a breakdown of business development. So if you think that networking groups and chamber mixers and public speaking and all that fine stuff that we have in London, that's kind of gone. People are having to develop referral chains through the webcam. I think that's the first thing that happens. So let's say
stuff there that will be useful to our
fascinating.
coffee break people and for us actually as well. So
I think so. Yes.
Using chat more. But yeah, no, that's been great.
So hands up, those of us who wish Bob had this chat with us 4 months ago.
Yes.
I can offer you a tequila, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, hang on. If we're playing these games, I can go into the garden with the cat.